Okay, so you've given us some fascinating material on financial crime intelligence. It can feel like a bit of a maze sometimes,
It really can. There's a lot going on in that space.
definitely. So for this deep dive, we thought we'd zero in on a really fundamental idea that shapes how organizations tackle these, well, serious threats.
Right. It's
Yeah,
called the risk-based approach.
exactly.
Hmm.
And in simple terms, the risk-based approach, or RBA, as you'll hear it called, it's really about making smart choices with, limited resources.
Okay.
Think of like a hospital emergency room. They don't treat every single person exactly the same way the second they walk in.
No, they prioritize.
They prioritize based on who's most critical, who's at the highest risk. RBA does the same thing for financial crime. It directs the really intense scrutiny towards the highest risk areas.
Whether that's money laundering or, say, terrorist financing.
Precisely. It's really the practical backbone for how institutions try to deal with this stuff. So our mission today, then, is to really dig into why this RBA is so important and how it actually works in practice, day to day.
Yeah, the nuts and bolts.
And we're drawing straight from that risk-based approach FinCrime intelligence article you sent over. Hopefully by the end, you'll see how this strategy is, well, key to keeping the financial system safer.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe surprisingly, how it actually touches your own financial life.
It does, often behind the scenes.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Why is this risk-based approach considered so essential in fighting financial crime?
Well, the article nails it, I think. It calls it a cornerstone of effective financial crime compliance program.
A cornerstone, okay.
Yeah, and think about the alternative for a second.
Yeah.
Imagine trying to apply the same super intense level of checks to every single transaction, every customer.
Regardless of size or how normal it looks.
Exactly. The sheer volume globally, it would just be impossible.
Right.
Institutions would drown in data, costs would explode, and frankly, effective monitoring would just grind to a halt.
It sounds completely unworkable, like trying to individually vet every single person walking through Times Square.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. The RBA brings that much-needed focus.
Okay.
Its real power is applying that enhanced scrutiny, as the article says, exactly where the risks seem highest.
Where the red flags are waving.
Pretty much. Where the data points towards a higher chance of something illicit happening. It's like pointing your best security cameras at the most vulnerable doors and windows.
That makes a lot of sense. So how do they actually do that? How do organizations pinpoint those higher risk spots? The article mentions key components for risk assessment.
It does, yeah. A solid risk assessment is really the foundation. And the piece you shared highlights 4 crucial elements we need to look at.
Okay, what's first?
First, there's customer risk. This means looking at different factors to gauge the potential risk tied to a specific person or, a company.
Right, and the article gives examples, like someone's job, their nationality, where their money is coming from,
Exactly. Source of funds, source of wealth.
and even just how they typically handle their transactions, their behavior.
All those pieces. So if someone's in a profession known to be sometimes exploited by criminals, or maybe they have trouble explaining where a large sum of money came from.
Those could be indicators, not proof, but indicators.
Indicators, exactly. Or certain nationalities might unfortunately correlate with higher risks of corruption, statistically speaking. Unusual transaction patterns, too, things that don't fit their profile.
Okay.
These aren't automatic judgments, let's be clear, but they are data points that help build up that overall risk picture for a customer.
Got it. So that's customer risk. Number 2 is geographic risk. That seems fairly straightforward. Location, location, location.
Essentially, yes. Geographic risk is about countries or specific regions known for things like high corruption levels, maybe weak regulations, or just generally known criminal activity.
So if a transaction involves one of those places.
Then dealing with people or companies connected to those areas just inherently carries a bit more risk.
So a bank might just apply more checks, be a bit more cautious, if money's moving to or from a country flagged as high risk for money laundering.
That's a classic example, yeah, absolutely. Okay, third component, product service risk.
Right. This is about the financial products themselves.
Correct. Certain products or services might just be, well, more attractive or easier to misuse for illegal stuff.
And the article mentioned things like prepaid cards, private banking, virtual currencies.
Mm-hmm. Those are good examples.
What makes them riskier than, say, my basic savings account?
Well, they often have features that appeal to criminals. Prepaid cards, for instance, can sometimes offer more anonymity depending on how they're set up.
Okay.
Private banking deals with very wealthy clients, complex finances. Sometimes that complexity can be used to hide things.
I see.
And virtual currencies. Well, they're newer, the rules are still evolving globally, and that creates opportunities for misuse. It's about the product's inherent features.
Understanding how it could be exploited.
hmm
Okay. And the last piece of the assessment puzzle.
The last one is channel risk.
Channel risk, meaning how you interact with the bank.
Exactly. The mode of delivery, as the article puts it, is it online, in person, or through intermediaries?
Right.
Different channels can present different levels of risk when it comes to, say, verifying who someone really is or keeping an eye on what they're doing.
So maybe a purely online relationship where you never meet face-to-face might be seen as slightly higher risk initially than someone walking into a branch.
Yeah, that's a general idea, yeah, though online security is obviously very sophisticated now, too. But the key thing, and the article stresses this,
Yes.
is that these four things, customer, geography, product, channel, city, they aren't looked at in isolation.
Ah, right. They work together.
Exactly. They're considered in combination to figure out the overall risk profile.
So it's the whole picture how these factors interact. Okay, so
Yeah.
you do this assessment, you figure out the risk profile. What happens next?
Yeah.
How does this change what the bank actually does? The article talks about customer due diligence, CDD.
That's right. The risk assessment directly dictates the level, the intensity of CDD applied. The article lays out three levels. First is the basic one, simplified due diligence, or SDD.
And that's for low-risk customers, it says. So what does simplified mean in practice? Fewer hoops to jump through.
Pretty much. Less intensive identity checks, maybe less frequent ongoing monitoring because the baseline risk is just deemed low.
Okay. Then there's standard due diligence. This sounds like, well, standard, what most people go through.
That's generally right. It's for most clients, it involves the usual stuff,
Hmm?
verifying identity, understanding why they need the account or service, the intended purpose.
Standard operating procedure.
Correct.
And then the third level, enhanced due diligence, EDD. This sounds like where things get serious.
That's fair to say. EDD kicks in for high-risk customers or scenarios. The article specifically calls out dealing with politically exposed persons.
PPs.
Right, PPPs, people in prominent public roles.
Exactly. Or situations involving really complex corporate structures. Why complex structures?
Yeah.
Because they can hide who's really in control.
That's often the concern, yes. They can be used to obscure the ultimate beneficial owners, which is a red flag.
And PPs, why the extra scrutiny there?
Mm.
Just because of their position?
Well, yes. Because of their influence and access, they're considered potentially higher risk for things like bribery or corruption. It doesn't mean they are corrupt, just that the risk profile is higher.
Got it. Risk, not accusation.
Precisely. And the article also makes the point that it's not just CDD that changes based on risk.
Oh, right.
Things like transaction monitoring systems, how they onboard a new customer, even internal controls within the institution, they're all tailored to reflect the identified risk levels.
So the risk level ripples through multiple processes. It's quite integrated.
It has to be effective.
Now, this whole RBA thing, it's not just something banks decided to do on their own, is it?
Yeah.
There's a bigger picture, regulations and global bodies.
Oh, absolutely. You've got major international players like the Financial Action Task Force, the FATF.
FATF, right. Heard of them.
They strongly champion the RBA. They set the global standards, essentially encouraging countries and institutions to adopt it.
And then individual countries or regions follow suit.
Largely, yes. Regulatory frameworks like the EU's anti-money laundering directives or the U.S. Bank Secrecy Act, they build RBA principles right into the law.
So it's often legally mandated, not just best practice.
In many places, yes. And interestingly, the article notes that regulators don't just check if you have controls, but how you apply them. They might question if firms are over or under applying resources.
Meaning you can't just throw maximum security at everything or do too little.
Exactly. You need to get it right for the level of risk. They want to see that firms can actually justify the decisions made based on documented risk assessments.
So there's an accountability piece there. You need to show your work.
Definitely. It pushes for a reasoned, evidence-based approach.
Okay, so we know what it is, how it works, the context. Let's get to the why. Why does this matter so much? What are the real benefits of taking this risk-based approach?
The article lays out some clear advantages. Number one is efficiency.
Okay.
By focusing your limited resources, your people, your tech, where they're most needed, you avoid wasting effort on low-risk stuff.
Makes sense. Concentrate your firepower.
Right. which frees up those resources to be more effective against the genuine threats.
Oh, no.
Flexibility, that's huge. RBA lets institutions adapt to new and emerging risks.
Because the threats aren't static, criminals are always finding new angles.
Constantly. New tech, new schemes.
Yeah.
A rigid, rules-based system can quickly become outdated. RBA is designed to evolve with the threat landscape.
So it's built to be adaptable.
Nice.
Yeah.
How about relations with the watchdogs?
That links to regulatory confidence. When institutions show they have a smart, dynamic, risk-based system.
It builds trust with the regulators.
Exactly. It shows they're being proactive, not just ticking boxes. They're actively managing the risk.
Okay, and the bottom line, does it actually help catch more bad guys?
Well, that's the goal. The final benefit the article mentions is improved detection.
That's it. By focusing that enhanced scrutiny on the high-risk areas, you simply heighten the chances of identifying unusual or suspicious behavior.
Things you might miss if you're spreading your attention too thinly.
Precisely. That targeted focus is key for actually disrupting illicit financial flows.
So better efficiency, flexibility, regulatory trust, and crucially, better detection. Seems like a strong case. But the article does mention it's not always smooth sailing putting this into practice.
No, it definitely has its challenges. That's important to acknowledge.
What kind of hurdles do organizations face?
Well, one big one mentioned is ensuring consistent application across departments or jurisdictions.
Ah, yeah. A large bank operating in multiple countries, getting everyone on the same page.
Exactly. Different teams, different cultures, different local nuances.
Oh.
Maintaining consistency in how risk is assessed and managed is tough.
I can imagine.
What else?
Keeping risk models up to date, that's a constant battle.
Because the threats keep changing. Right. The models you use to score risk need ongoing review and updates to catch the latest criminal methods. It's not a one-and-done thing.
And it probably requires skilled people to use these models and make judgments.
Absolutely. The article flags training staff to make risk-based judgments effectively. It's not just about algorithms. It's about people understanding risk and applying the principles correctly.
Requires expertise and ongoing education.
Definitely. And one more big one. Balancing business growth with compliance obligations.
Ah, the classic tension. Pushing for new business versus managing the associated risks.
Sometimes those goals can seem like they're pulling in opposite directions. Finding the right balance is key.
So, given these challenges, how do companies try to make RBA work effectively? What are the best practices mentioned?
Well, regular reviews are critical, constantly looking at their risk framework to keep it current.
Makes sense. Stay agile.
Using technology helps too. Data-driven risk scoring can bring more objectivity and efficiency to the process.
Using the data smartly.
Yes. And perhaps most fundamentally, embedding risk awareness into company culture through continuous education.
So it's not just the compliance department's job, it's everyone's responsibility.
Ideally, yes. Making sure everyone understands the risks and their role in managing them.
Right, so it's about the framework, the tools, and the people and culture.
It's the whole package.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, it feels clear the risk-based approach isn't just some, compliance checkbox.
Far from it.
It's really a core strategic method. It's dynamic, it has to be, allowing institutions to fight financial crime more effectively. And that protects not just them, but the whole financial system that you, the listener, interact with daily.
Absolutely well put. It underpins so much of the security we often take for granted.
Which kind of leads to a final thought, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Given how creative financial criminals are and how fast technology is moving, what are the next challenges? How do we make sure this risk-based approach keeps working effectively down the line?
That is the crucial question. How do you continually adapt this framework?
Yeah, how do you balance that need for security with convenience, with innovation, all moving at lightning speed?
It's a constant balancing act, and one that requires ongoing vigilance and, frankly, ingenuity from the defenders, too. Something to definitely keep thinking about.